Hey guys, well, we are headed over to Brigham's to look at the 1950 John Deere A project that he picked up. It is quite the project. So he only lives a couple minutes from my house here. He's in a townhouse like I am, and since he got his grandpa's tractor, which is that 1941 John Deere B, if you guys remember that, I showed you a quick blip of it at the Now Then Threshing Show. He has since picked up the John Deere A because, well, he got bit by the antique tractor bug. So, that's where we're headed now, and as soon as we get there, I'll show you kind of the catastrophe that he's dealing with. So, when we get there, you'll see it. So, see you in a minute. All right, guys. So we're over at Brigham's house, looking at his 1950 Model A, and he's got it pretty well tore down. Everything's, well, thanks to everybody in our club, but we've got the block and everything out, the crank out. He's working on cleaning up the crankcase right now. But this thing had a bit of a catastrophic failure. This here is a pile of parts. This is what's within the crankcase. And it was all in the crankcase. So, some of this is chunks of piston, the cam gear, more piston, the piston pin, the rod. I think this was...
They're still on the cam, or the crank.
This section was still on the crank, so the rod itself, but as you can see, it has a pretty good bend to it. And it's busted off this end, and here's the cap with the rest of it. Obviously not in very good shape. I still can't believe this. But our theory is they probably forgot to put cotter pins on the ends of the castle nuts, which allowed the nuts to work loose, which caused the rod to slap back and forth on the crank, which caused the bolts to probably stretch, and everything failed from there. So in the process, it grenaded and blew apart the rod, blew apart the piston, which is up here. Which is a shame because they're 90 over aluminum pistons. I believe they're M&W pistons. So that's what it should look like compared to what it is. And even this rod has a slight bend to it, a slight curve. But, and if that wasn't bad enough, it also busted the skirt off the bottom of the block. So we're missing this whole section. Well, we're not really missing it. We know where it is, but it's not on the block. We still haven't checked the crank dimensions. We gotta polish it up yet. There's some grooves worn into it, some ridges. You can kind of see here where that rod was smacking into it. So. But the gear on the crank is good, and the gear on the governors is good, or on the governor. So this thing must have just busted and fell straight to the bottom, and luckily didn't do any damage to the other gears. But let's see what else. The main bearings, we got a lot of the underlying steel, the copper or brass starting to show through, which means there's not really any bearing left in the mains. The rods look okay as far as the bearings go. The head looks to be in good shape, which is good because that's an expensive part. The push rods, 3 out of 4 of them are bent. They're all lying down here, so I can see this one itself. You can see this one is bent right in this area. But we got to get some push rods. The governor housing, I'm guessing when the crank or the camshaft gear broke, it probably wedged itself underneath here and busted the housing. So you can see, let's see, grab this light. You can see where it's broken there. So we got to get a new housing. And the rocker arm assembly also is cracked and bent. So
It's got a hairline on it. This one here.
okay. Yeah, these are bent, and then there's a hairline crack in it. I think a couple of them actually are bent. So another rocker arm assembly we'll need. Other than that, that's pretty much it. We got a new tire. But essentially we're looking at everything from the crankshaft forward and up, minus the internals of the governor and the head. So could be worse. Could have put a hole through the back of the main case in the transmission, and it didn't do that, but it did put quite a mark in there. Luckily it didn't go through.
Oil pump.
Oh yeah, we'll need an oil pump too, because this section here is broke off. It's down on the bottom of the crankcase. I dropped it down in there, but it'll be clean when it comes out because that's all diesel fuel or kerosene. But it's a project. Brigham said he wanted a project, and he keeps thanking us for getting him into this hobby. But the hood, it has been cut, but it did have a patch welded in, and they did actually a really nice job welding it in. Actually, I think they used the piece of the hood that they cut out, probably.
The top needs to be shaped a little bit.
So yeah, it needs to be, the weld needs to be ground and finished smooth, but little body work, little elbow grease, yes indeedy. But there she sits in a townhouse. Yeah. So now he's got 2 tractors, his grandpa's B and his Model A, taking after me, following in my footsteps. Well, as you can see, that Model A is going to be a little bit of work. So if there's anybody out there that has some parts they want to either let go at a pretty good price to help Brigham out on his first project, it would be much appreciated. Or if anybody knows anybody that has parts, he'd like to get this thing back together and running for under $1,000, but I don't know, it's going to be tough. But hope you guys enjoyed the little snippet of the Model A, and as always, stay tuned for more, because there's going to be a lot more coming of both the Model A and of my little side projects that I got going on. So stay tuned. See ya.